She was imagining frying butterbur with meat and miso when she realized Jinchi was standing right beside her. "What is it, sir?" Maomao said, glaring at Jinchi and automatically becoming more deferential. Jinchi clearly wanted to say something. "Why are you so quiet?" he asked, also speaking with the directness he usually expected. Why wasn't she saying anything? There could really be just one reason, couldn't there? Because I don't have anything to say. She had only spoken the truth, but apparently that was a mistake. Jinchi bit his lip, and an inscrutable expression crossed his face. Maomao wasn't worried that he might burst into tears. He wasn't a little boy, but he still managed to look thoroughly pathetic. He was the one who said she should act more brusque with him, Maomao thought. She wasn't usually one to start a conversation. When she didn't have anything specific to talk about, and no one asked her anything, she generally stayed quiet. She was mystified by why this seemed like such a shock to the man. She was simply scratching the back of her neck, wondering what to do when a meat skewer stall came into view. She began to trot quickly and ordered 2 skewers from the man at the counter. Looking at the perfectly crisped chicken made her mouth water. "Try it," she said, passing a skewer to Jinchi. He took it slowly, looking at it as if he had never seen one before. "Quick, before it gets cold." Maomao guided them to a small side street just off the main road. She brushed some dust off a wooden crate and sat down on top of it. When she bit into the grilled meat, juices exploded in her mouth. The fragrant chicken skin gave an audible snap. "God, that is good." Maomao leaned forward to keep the juices from running onto her clothes. Jinchi wasn't eating, but he just watched her. "Not going to have yours. As you can see, it isn't poisoned." "No, that is, not what I'm worried about," Jinchi said, tapping his cheek. Now she remembered. She had stuffed cotton into his mouth to help give him a different profile. Maomao took out a square of paper and passed it to him. He spat out the cotton balls and tossed them into a nearby wastebasket. A versatile paper square like that one was very valuable. It was just another of Suhyun's thoughtful touches, along with the clothes. "I didn't think to bring any replacement cotton," Maomao thought. This bothered her perfectionist nature, but she doubted most people would notice. Jinchi continued to inspect the skewer with a certain amount of wonder, then brought it to his mouth. It was a little warm for him, so he blew on it forcefully before chewing and swallowing. "What do you think, sir? It's a damn sight better than what they served at the bivouac." "Good and salty," Jinchi said, wiping the juice from his lips with his fingers. Maomao took a handkerchief from her pouch and handed it to him. She was thinking about the word bivouac. As far as she knew, eunuchs did not normally serve in the military, so she wasn't sure what to make of this. Perhaps someone like Jinchi would be living in the wilderness if a war began. But in normal times, what would cause a eunuch to spend his nights in the field? As she considered this question, Maomao studied Jinchi's face. Some of the makeup around his mouth had come off, but it wasn't enough to worry about. She looked away. "All right, let's get whatever our business is here over with," she thought. She finished the last of the meat on her skewer and stood up from the crate. She was determined to go back and buy that daikon and chicken once she had ditched Jinchi. Despite her haste, Jinchi insisted on doing everything with slow, elegant movements, much to Maomao's annoyance. "Are you quite sure you're going to be in time for your meeting, Jinka?" she asked pointedly, using his fake name. "I think we have a few minutes yet. Wouldn't it be best to arrive early?" "It is bad manners to make someone wait for you." Now Jinchi looked annoyed. "If I did not know better, I would think you were trying to get rid of me. Would you?" Maomao said innocently, but of course Jinchi had hit the nail on the head. He seemed a bit sullen, but he didn't complain any further. Instead, he changed the subject. "I can't imagine life in the palace is that bad. Surely it must be better than here in the pleasure district." Maomao had to admit it wasn't terrible, particularly now that she was serving there of her own volition. She had a small room, but it was clean. She also had an offer to move to other quarters. She felt she had been quite lucky. However, the lifestyle wasn't the only reason she might want to return to the pleasure district. "I am worried about whether my old man is taking proper care of himself," she said. Jinchi's mouth practically hung open. "What?" Maomao asked. "It is nothing. I just never knew you were interested in anything besides drugs and poisons." Maomao replied with a glare. "Rude bastard." My adoptive father is my teacher in matters of medicine, so I certainly hope he will continue to live a good long time. Then she turned her back decisively on Jinchi and started walking. Yes, she knew for sure now. She wanted to get this over with. Jinchi, looking slightly frazzled, came up alongside her. This father of yours, I gather he is indeed a talented apothecary. After a moment, Maomao answered hesitantly, he is. She did not think it was fair of Jinchi leveraging talk of her father like this. Apparently he studied in the West when he was a young man. Thus he was familiar not only with her own region's traditional medicine, but with Western medical techniques as well. She sometimes noticed him writing notes in a language she didn't recognize. Occasionally he used words that sounded strange to her. This made her believe he had spent a long time in a foreign country. Really? He did that? Jinchi asked. He must have been something special then. I believe people are only sent on those studies with endorsement from the government. His transparent amazement only confirmed for Maomao that her father was an exceptional person. Yes, he is rather incredible. The old proverb holds that heaven doesn't give two gifts to one man, but I guess there are exceptions to the rule. The excitement was creeping into her voice now, and she was growing more voluble than usual. He must have been quite a man indeed. Jinchi, in contrast, looked more subdued than before. Maybe she had said too much. Perhaps something in her rush of words had upset him. He was the one who had insisted she talk, she thought. She wished he would make up his mind. Jinchi, desperate to look at anything but Maomao, let his gaze wander among the shops that lined the street. The restaurants and food stalls had given way to shops selling textiles and accessories. Men moved quickly from one shop to the next, picking presents to please their nighttime companions. And what is such a distinguished person doing running a druggist's shop in a nameless corner of the pleasure district? Jinchi's words held a hidden barb. He did not have much luck, despite all of heaven's gifts. He received much, but something was also taken from him. It was something important. Ill fortune was Liu Hemen's one great flaw, if he had one at all. His study in the West had been enough of a reason for the former emperor's mother, that is to say, the former empress dowager, to have him made a eunuch. Jinchi watched Maomao silently. As she began to fear another of her red light district jokes had fallen flat, he said, "You're telling me that the father who adopted you is a eunuch?" "Yes, sir," Maomao said, wondering if she hadn't mentioned it before. Jinchi started mumbling eunuch. Apothecary doctor. Amidst this talking and mumbling, they reached their destination. Maomao looked at the note Gaoshan had given her. "I believe that is it, sir," she said, pointing to a place just at the border of the pleasure district. The upper floor was an inn and the lower floor was a restaurant, a fairly standard arrangement. "Yes, I think you are right." "But we still have a few minutes," Jinchi said, looking around. "Ah, now I get it," Maomao thought, narrowing her eyes. She understood why Jinchi had gone to all the trouble of disguising himself and marching around the town market. Yes, she saw it all now. Maomao let out a long breath. "I worry that walking around too much will cause your makeup to come off. Also, the person you are meeting might already be inside. It is better to go and have a look than to risk making them wait, isn't it?" Jinchi finally seemed to understand. "I shall part ways with you here, sir." "What, here?" "Yes, you took the trouble to disguise yourself. It would spoil everything if I walked in with you." Maomao gave a polite nod of the head and started back toward the market. She looked over her shoulder as she walked and saw Jinchi entering the restaurant. She thought that even eunuchs needed a day off sometimes. She crossed her arms and nodded to herself. Then she began to think again. If he had come all this way, he might as well go into the pleasure district itself. She knew what kind of restaurant Jinchi had just gone into. They served the waitresses along with the food. Well, she hoped he had a good night, she thought with a touch of sarcasm, staring at the restaurant with a freezing look in her eye. Chapter 8. The Plum Poison. Maomao awoke to the twittering of sparrows. She sat up in her simple bed. The familiar smell of brewing medicine tickled her nose. "Good morning," said a calm, grandmotherly voice. It belonged to her father. That's right, she thought. I am back home. This was her first trip back since she had begun working in the outer court. Maids in her position usually had very few vacations. It was not common for them to have time off. Even if their master took a day off work, he still continued his life. Many masters had more than 1 or 2 servants. This allowed a little flexibility for one of them to take some time off. However, things were different with Jinshi, as he had so few attendants. Maomao could not believe she had made it this long by herself. She tipped her proverbial hat to Jinshi's attendant, Su'en. Su'en's indulgence was the only reason Maomao had been able to take this break. Maomao paid for it, but Su'en worked her relentlessly the rest of the time. Maomao got out of bed and sat in a crude chair. Her father brought her some warm congee in a chipped bowl. She sipped at it. It needed salt, but her father had at least given it a good, hearty flavor by mixing in some fragrant herbs. Maomao added a few drops of vinegar and stirred. "Make sure you wash your face," her father said. "Yeah, once I eat." Maomao continued stirring the porridge with her spoon, while her father prepared the ingredients for the medicine he was mixing up. "What do you plan to do today?" he asked. Maomao looked at him almost a bit confused. "Nothing special," she said. "In that case, perhaps you could go to the verdigris house for me." There was a beat before Maomao said, "Sure, all right." She added another generous dash of vinegar to her congee. Her father's apothecary was situated inside the verdigris house, but when he asked her to go there, he had something else in mind. When Maomao arrived, she greeted the manservant outside with a familiar hello and went inside. She passed through the elegant atrium of the entry hall, then proceeded down a covered walkway to one side. The central courtyard was as fine as that in any aristocrat's mansion. At night, it was lit with burning lanterns. The building was kept in good enough order to impress those who occasionally came by for tea during the day. Maomao did not stop in the courtyard but continued to a lonely little outbuilding. This was no place for customers. Once inside, the reek of illness filled her nostrils. Morning, a woman slept inside, her hair disheveled. She looked like a particularly unpleasant skeleton. "I brought your medicine," Maomao continued. The woman did not speak. One might almost suspect she had forgotten how to speak long ago. She used to chase Maomao out, seemingly from sheer hatred. But in the past few years she had lost the energy to do even that. Maomao went to where the woman lay indolently on her back. She helped her swallow the powder she had brought. It was what her father used instead of quicksilver or arsenic. He said it was less poisonous and more effective, but at the moment it wasn't even helping to sedate the woman. They had no other way to treat her except to give her this powder. The noseless woman was nearly 40 years old. Once, she had been celebrated as a butterfly and fated as a flower. The verdigris house was a prestigious establishment now, able to pick and choose its customers, but it hadn't always been so. In the years after Maomao's birth, there was a time when the place had little more than a mud-spattered sign. It was during that time that this woman had been a courtesan, taking customers. To her misfortune, she had contracted syphilis, known in Maomao's language as the plum poison. If this medicine had been available to her in the early stages of her illness, perhaps she might have been cured. But by now, the state of her body was barely worth looking at. The illness had damaged both her appearance and her mind, leaving her memory in pieces. Time was a cruel thing. When Liu Men first saw the woman, her illness was quiet. If she had told him about it then instead of waiting, things might not have become so difficult. However, not everyone was quick to trust a eunuch who appeared suddenly, a person considered an outcast from the rear palace. A courtesan's life depended on having customers, or she would go hungry. When the lesions returned several years later, the tumors spread very quickly. The woman was confined to a room where customers would not see her. She was being overlooked, but this was still, by one measure, remarkably compassionate treatment. A courtesan who could no longer work was typically forced to leave the establishment. The woman was fortunate. She wasn't simply covered in whitening cream and eyebrow ink and left in a ditch. Maomao took a rag from a wash basin and began wiping the woman's body as she lay there. Perhaps I should burn some incense as well, she thought. The perpetually closed door kept the stench contained within the room. There was some incense on hand that the woman had received from a certain noble. It was a fancy incense, with an aroma the man himself was said to enjoy. However, it was rarely used. This could be a problem when mixing medicines, because many of them absorbed unusual odors. The incense was regularly burned only when the man himself appeared. Then a small amount would be lit. Maomao helped herself to some of the incense. It had a very slightly sweet scent, and when it wafted over to her, a small smile passed over the woman's face. She began to hum a children's song in a broken voice. She seemed to have regressed to her childhood. Hopefully she was at least reliving a pleasant memory. Maomao set the incense burner in a corner of the room so the courtesan would not accidentally knock it over. Just then she heard pounding footsteps from outside. Good Lord! What is it? One of the apprentices appeared. Maomao seemed to remember she served Maomao. The girl was reluctant to come into the sick room but hovered in the doorway. She was probably scared of the woman with no nose. Sis said to bring you a message, the girl told Maomao. She said if I found you here to tell you that you had better stay here for a while. She said there is a weird guy with a monocle out there. Maomao said. She understood who the girl meant. The weird man with glasses was a long-standing customer of the Verdigris house, but he was not someone with whom Maomao wished to cross paths. As long as she stayed in this room, she would be safe. The madam would not do something so foolish as to show a customer something she had worked hard to hide. Okay, Maomao said, I understand. You can go back. Then she let out a breath. The woman with no nose stopped her song and pulled out a set of marbles. They were made with coloured pebbles. She began lining them up one next to the other, as if trying to organise the tattered bits of her memories. Fool woman, Maomao thought. She went to a corner of the room and crouched down. Shortly after, Maomao came to let Maomao know that the coast was clear. Unlike her apprentice, the courtesan entered the room without hesitation. She seemed to know it well. Thanks for taking care of her today. Maomao set out a round pillow. Maomao sat and smiled down at the sick woman. The patient did not react. She had fallen asleep at some point. Maomao said, they talked about you know what again. Maomao did indeed know what. The very thought was enough to give her goosebumps. He is a persistent old man, isn't he? I'm amazed you can stand him, sis. He is a good customer if you can accept him as he is. And given what he pays, the old lady is not about to object. Yes, and I am sure that is why she is so keen for me to become a courtesan. The customer in question was the reason the madam had been so intent on bringing Maomao into her employ these past years. If Maomao had not been hired by Jinshi, she very likely would have been sold to this customer by now. She said, I don't even want to think about it, and her face contorted. Maomao exhaled pointedly when she saw this expression. From an outside perspective, it might look like an excellent opportunity. You've got to be kidding. Don't make that face at me. Courtesans had a somewhat different idea from most people of what constituted a good match. Do you know how few of us get to end up with someone we truly desire? I know. For the madam, personal attraction weighs little, but silver is very, very important. That is the cost of a ticket on the boat to heaven, Maomao said with a jovial laugh. She ran her fingers through the sick woman's hair, then whispered to Maomao, I think the old lady is thinking of selling one of us off one of these days. We are getting to be about that age. Maomao was not quite 30 yet, but for a courtesan, it was natural to start thinking about retirement at that age. Sell high, as they say, or rather, sell before your looks started to fade. Maomao silently studied Maomao's profile. Her face, still beautiful, appeared awash in a number of emotions, but Maomao didn't want to think about them too hard. Those were feelings she still didn't understand. If such a thing as love existed, Maomao thought she had left it in the womb of the woman who bore her when she entered the world. What if you started a place of your own? The last thing I want is to compete with that old woman. Maomao must have enough money to free herself, Maomao thought. If she did not want to leave the courtesan's life, it must have been because she was not ready. Just a little longer, Maomao said with a smile. I will not be in this line of work forever. Jinshi pressed his chop to some paperwork, and his face was long. The outing the day before must have tired him. He sighed. He had never imagined that the establishment where the meeting took place would be a virtual extension of the pleasure district. He hadn't gone there for that. Furthermore, the whole point of his disguise was that it was difficult for him to go out in public quietly. He had ended up with Maomao accompanying him almost to the very doorstep of his meeting. This was something he hadn't envisioned. The idea came from the aide quietly organizing the papers beside him. This man had served him for many years, but perhaps that made him too willing to take matters into his own hands. He no doubt believed what he had done was for Jinchi's benefit. Jinchi, however, could have raised a number of objections. "Gae-shun, what are you plotting?" Jinchi asked. Gae-shun shook his head, as if the idea of plotting anything had never occurred to him. "Allow me to answer a question with a question, sir. How was your little trip into town?" "Ah, yes." Jinchi wasn't quite sure what to say about it. He took a sip of tea in hopes of stalling. He was sure now. Gae-shun thought he was helping, however that was.